Before we jump in, don't forget to subscribe to Brave Animals for incredible real-life stories, where animals become heroes, uncover hidden truths, and change lives forever. You won't want to miss what today's dog did in the middle of a sunny plaza. Now, let's dive in. The dog wouldn't stop barking at the woman in the wheelchair. People stared, shook their heads, even scolded the officer handling the dog. But the barking grew louder. And when something small and black fell from her bag, everything changed. It was a sunny Thursday morning in downtown Lexington. The kind of morning where joggers filled the sidewalk, coffee shops buzzed with early conversations, and the plaza near 4th Street Fountain came alive with musicians, tourists, and regulars enjoying the warmth. Officer Jake Mendez was walking his K9 partner, Arrow, along their usual patrol route. Arrow was a well-trained German shepherd, known around town as the gentle giant with a sharp nose and a heart of gold. Jake trusted him more than he trusted most people. They'd been through a lot together. Drug busts, search missions, even one emotional night when Arrow found a missing toddler in the rain. But today felt ordinary until it wasn't. As they turned the corner into the plaza, Arrow suddenly froze. His ears perked, his body tensed. Then without warning, he let out a deep, sharp bark and lunged toward a bench near the fountain. Jake pulled back on the leash instinctively. "Arrow, heel!" he called. But Arrow wouldn't stop. His focus was locked on a woman sitting in a wheelchair, near the edge of the fountain. She looked to be in her late 50s, wearing a large sun hat and oversized sunglasses. A floral shawl covered her lap. Next to her, a large tote bag hung loosely on one side of the chair. The woman flinched as Arrow barked again, loud and forceful this time. People turned. A man sipping iced coffee stared. A mother nearby pulled her child closer. A street musician stopped playing. "Call off your dog," someone shouted. "She's in a wheelchair." Jake was already stepping between them. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry, he's trained. He usually doesn't act like this. Arrow, sit." But Arrow wouldn't sit. Instead, he let out a low growl and inched forward, nose pointed at the woman's bag. He wasn't aggressive, not biting, but it was the kind of growl that made your skin crawl. The woman looked startled. Her lips quivered. I don't know why he's barking at me," she said in a shaky voice. "I'm just here for fresh air. Please control your animal." "I understand," Jake replied calmly. "May I ask what's in your bag?" He's trained to detect narcotics, explosives, electronics. She gripped the bag tighter. "Just snacks and a book," she said, quickly. Jake crouched beside Arrow, resting a hand on the dog's back. His gut was starting to turn. Arrow had never reacted like this to snacks. Something was off. Just then, Arrow lunged again, not violently, but enough to nudge the bag. It slipped. Something small rolled out and hit the pavement with a dull clink. Jake saw it immediately. So did everyone around. A tiny black device the size of a lipstick tube, with wires and a blinking red light. The plaza went silent. Someone whispered, "What is that?" The woman tried to grab the object, but Jake got there first. He held it up, staring. It wasn't a bomb, not big enough, but it was definitely electronic, and definitely not something you'd find in your average tote. "I need you to keep your hands where I can see them," Jake said firmly. The woman froze. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice colder now. Jake radioed dispatch, without looking away. "Unit 14 requesting tech support at 4th Street Plaza. Found unknown electronic device during K9 alert." The dispatcher responded immediately. "Copy. Sending backup now." Arrow stood firm, tail still, eyes locked on the woman like a statue of loyalty and warning. "I want to remind you," Jake continued, "it's a felony to carry surveillance or signal jamming devices on public property without authorization." "I don't even know what that is," she said, though her fingers twitched against the side of the wheelchair. Jake took a step back and took a closer look at her. Her legs, covered by the shawl, didn't move. But something didn't sit right. She wasn't scared like most innocent people would be. She was calm. too calm. You live around here? He asked. No, she replied. I just come for the sunshine? Got ID? She hesitated. It's in my other bag, at home. Of course it was. By now a small crowd had formed. Phones were out. People were recording. The musician was narrating quietly to his stream. She said she couldn't move, he whispered into the mic. But did y'all see her hand go for that thing real quick? Backup officers arrived 2 minutes later. The woman was asked to stand. She didn't. But when they gently pulled the shawl back to inspect the wheelchair for any additional devices, Jake spotted it. Her left leg twitched, and not in the way someone paralyzed twitches involuntarily. It was reflexive, controlled. Ma'am, he said quietly, I need you to stand up. I can't. Please try. I'm disabled. Aro let out one short bark, and then she stood. Gasps rippled through the plaza. The woman stood fully upright, shaky at first but balanced, and Jake's heart sank. She wasn't disabled. She wasn't even supposed to be there, and thanks to Aro, this was only the beginning. Officer Jake Mendez didn't need confirmation. The second the woman stood up, every instinct in his body screamed that something was seriously wrong. It wasn't just that she lied about being disabled. It was the way she did it. Controlled. Calculated. As if she was testing the water to see how much she could get away with. The moment she rose, the plaza buzzed with murmurs. Phones came out. Someone gasped. She can walk? But she said... Another voice cut in. The dog knew. The dog knew something was off. Jake signaled the 2 backup officers to move in. Aro stayed firmly by his side, watching her every move like a sentry. The woman didn't resist, but she didn't show fear either. It was almost unsettling how calm she was. Jake stepped forward, holding the small black device in his gloved hand. Can you explain what this is? She looked at it like it was a piece of gum someone had dropped. Never seen it before, it must have been planted. That's a serious accusation, he said. And a dangerous one, considering this was found directly under your bag. She said nothing. Her eyes scanned the gathering crowd. Jake noticed her pupils dilating. Her breathing was steady, too steady. I'm going to need your name, he said. Still silence. Jake nodded to one of the officers. We're taking her in. She has the right to remain silent, but she's not staying here. The woman was cuffed. Her bag collected for evidence, and she was carefully escorted toward the cruiser parked at the plaza's edge. Aro stayed behind, sniffing the bench, the wheels of the chair, and the nearby trash can. He paused at the left side of the wheelchair and let out a low whine. Jake knelt beside him. You got more, buddy? Aro circled once and then sat tail thumping against the pavement. That was his signal. He'd found something. Jake reached underneath the wheelchair seat and found a hidden compartment taped to the metal frame. Inside was a small flash drive sealed in plastic. He held it up. Well, what do we have here? By now, tech support had arrived. 2 guys from the city's cyber crimes division showed up with gloves and scanners. One of them took the flash drive carefully and bagged it. Looks like encrypted data, he said. Could be nothing, could be everything. Jake didn't need to wait to know it was something big. Aro's instincts never failed. Whatever was on that flash drive, it had been important enough to hide, and important enough to lie about a disability to stay near a crowded public space. Back at the station, Jake watched from behind the one-way mirror as the woman sat in the interview room. Her name, as it turned out, wasn't Mary Long as she had claimed in an earlier statement. Fingerprint analysis connected her to several aliases across 3 states. No outstanding warrants, but plenty of suspicious connections. She'd used fake IDs to rent apartments, had multiple burner phones, and had withdrawn cash in small amounts from different ATMs across the region. What she didn't have was a clean explanation for the device or the flash drive. The tech team analyzed the contents of the flash drive within hours. What they found shook the entire department. Encrypted files labeled with dates and codes, a list of names, surveillance footage, of people entering and leaving various public buildings. Even more chilling, there was a folder containing dozens of license plate numbers with timestamps and GPS coordinates. "This isn't some random woman," said Detective Harlan, peering at the screen. "This is organized surveillance, targeted, planned. Someone paid her to sit in that plaza." Jake rubbed his jaw. So what was she collecting? Hard to tell, but a couple of those plates belonged to people in witness protection. She may have been tracking federal cases. Jake sat down, the weight of the discovery settling on his shoulders. Arrow had done more than just stop a fake disabled woman. He may have uncovered a major leak that could compromise multiple investigations. The next morning, Jake returned to the plaza, not because he had to, but because he needed to see it again with fresh eyes. The world had gone on. The fountain splashed, gently. Kids played near the statue. A man with a guitar strummed a Johnny Cash cover near the coffee stand. It was like nothing had happened. But something had. Right there on that bench, Arrow walked beside him, tongue out, tail swaying. Jake gave his ear a scratch. "You're the reason we got to her in time," he said. "People might never know what you really stopped, but I do." A barista from the corner coffee truck waved. "Hey, that your dog that barked at the lady yesterday?" Jake smiled. "Yeah, that's Arrow." The barista leaned over the counter. "Saw the video on TikTok. He's a legend now. People are calling him Detective Dog." Jake chuckled. "He's earned it." Just then, a little girl walked up, holding a small paper bag. She looked up at Arrow with wide eyes. "My grandma said your dog saved people." Jake knelt to her level. "Your grandma's right." She handed the bag to Jake. "These are treats, for him, because he's brave." Jake opened the bag. Homemade peanut butter biscuits, shaped like bones. He handed one to Arrow, who accepted it with careful grace. "Thank you," Jake said. "That means a lot." The girl smiled and ran back to her grandmother. As Jake stood, he felt the sun on his face. Everything had changed, yet everything looked the same. That's how the world worked. Quiet heroes, hidden dangers, and the moments where instincts beat appearances. He looked at Arrow. "You always know, don't you?" Arrow didn't answer. Of course. He didn't need to. Jake looked back at the bench where it all began. Some stories didn't make headlines, but the ones that mattered most often started with a bark. The day after the Plaza incident, the Lexington Police Department's cyber unit worked through the night. The files found on the flash drive were more than concerning. They were dangerous, and they raised more questions than anyone had answers. For Detective Harlan called Officer Jake Mendez into the conference room just after sunrise. The blinds were still drawn, coffee cups half full on the table, and the air smelled like stress and caffeine. Jake stepped in with Arrow by his side. The dog had barely left his heel since the arrest. Something about the case had him alert, like he knew it wasn't over. Harlan pointed to a monitor on the wall. A document was open on the screen, rows and rows of names, license plates, addresses. Each entry had a note next to it. Surveillance ongoing, subject confirmed, or worse, do not intervene. "What is this?" Jake asked. Harlan leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "We think it's a watch list, not a government one. This looks like it was built privately, and whoever compiled it had access to high-level data. Stuff even we can't pull, without warrants." Jake stared at the screen. "And that woman in the wheelchair, she was gathering this? Possibly just a small part of it. Our guess is she was one of several field operatives. The plaza was just her turf." Jake shook his head slowly. "She had a full view of the courthouse, the metro entrance, and the federal building. It's like she was planted right in the middle of the perfect triangle." "Exactly," Harlan said. "And she's not talking. No real name, no origin, nothing. Her fingerprints? We traced them to a Jane Doe case out of Nevada 12 years ago. After that, she vanished." Jake let out a breath and glanced down at Arrow. The dog was still watching the door. "She's waiting for something," Jake said. "Or someone." Harlan nodded. "We just don't know who." By noon, the story had already slipped into local news cycles. Most headlines read something like, "Canine officer helps uncover high-tech spy in public plaza." It had the kind of intrigue that made it stick online. People loved a good dog hero story. What they didn't know was how deep the rabbit hole went. Jake sat at his desk looking through the files from the flash drive again. Each line was a person, a real person. Some were teachers, some were retired military. One name stood out to him. A journalist named Lauren Kendricks. She lived 2 towns over and had recently written about government surveillance tactics. He tapped her name into the system. She had no criminal record, no known enemies. But she was on the list. He picked up the phone. Lauren Kendricks looked tired when she opened the door. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, coffee mug in hand. "You're not here to arrest me, are you?" she asked. Jake smiled gently. "No, ma'am. Just looking for a few answers." She stepped aside and let him in. Arrow followed, sniffed once at her shoes, then sat near the hallway like a sentry. "I've been getting weird emails," Lauren said, pouring herself more coffee. "Anonymous tips, mostly junk. But last week, someone sent me a link to a dark, web drop site, full of license plates, courtroom logs, GPS logs. I didn't open it. Figured it was a trap." Jake nodded. "We found your name in a similar file, along with dozens of others." Lauren sat down, concern creeping into her face. "Why me?" "Your article on federal surveillance. You mentioned public blind spots, plaza zones, courthouse leak points. You think I was targeted because of that?" "I think someone doesn't like what you know." Lauren looked at Aro. "Is that the dog from the Plaza video?" Jake nodded. "That's Aro. He's the reason we're having this conversation instead of writing up an incident report." She crouched and scratched behind Aro's ear. "Good boy. Real good boy." Later that night, Jake was back at the station when the call came in. A suspicious van had been spotted circling the courthouse and then parked behind the same plaza bench where the woman had sat. The plate matched one of the entries from the flash drive. Jake and Arrow were the first on the scene. The van was dark blue, windows tinted, engine still warm. But no one inside. They moved in slowly. Jake circled the driver's side while Arrow stayed, alert near the back. The van was locked, but Jake could see inside. Equipment, cameras, a stack of small black devices just like the one that had fallen from the woman's bag. Backup arrived and they popped the doors. Inside was a mobile command unit, not police grade, but close. Monitors still on, feed still running. Someone had been watching live footage of the plaza just minutes before. "Whoever was here, they knew we were coming," said one officer. Jake pointed to a small screen still flickering. A paused image showed himself and Aro walking across the plaza 2 days ago. "They're not just watching civilians," Jake said. "They're watching us." Back at the department, the weight of the case had settled into everyone's bones. What began with a bark had grown into a surveillance network with no clear center, no face, no organization claiming responsibility. But there was one thing Jake knew for sure. "They're testing our systems," he told Harlan, "seeing how close they can get without being caught. That plaza wasn't random, the woman wasn't random, and now they know exactly how far we'll go before we notice." Harlan rubbed his chin. "So what do we do?" Jake looked at Arrow, then back at the screen. "We let them think we're behind, then we stay 10 steps ahead." He reached into his drawer, pulled out Arrow's favorite toy and tossed it toward the floor. Arrow caught it mid-air, tail wagging. "Hard." "Because this dog doesn't bark unless something is wrong," Jake said. "And I'm done waiting to find out what it is." Jake stood in front of the evidence board at the precinct, staring at the growing web of photos, locations, and documents, pinned in neat but overwhelming lines. The van from the plaza had yielded more than anyone had expected. In addition to the surveillance setup, a GPS tracker had recorded a list of recent destinations. All were public places, parks, courthouses, transit hubs, and each location matched names on the list recovered from the flash drive. Aro lay at Jake's feet, head resting on his paws, his eyes still half open like he was waiting for the next signal to move. Jake glanced down at him. "You knew from the start, didn't you?" he said softly. "You knew something wasn't right about her." Detective Harlan walked into the room holding 2 cups of coffee and passed one to Jake. "You've been here since dawn. Any new hits from tech?" Jake shook his head. "Nothing yet. The hard drives from the van were scrubbed. Someone knew how to cover their tracks. They left in a hurry, though, Harlan added. Could be they're panicking. Or they're watching how we react, Jake said. Every move we make might be part of their test. Harlan nodded slowly, then pulled a chair beside Jake. You ever wonder if they've got someone on the inside? Jake looked at him, eyes narrowing. You think this goes that deep? I think if someone was bold enough to plant a fake, disabled operative with a surveillance device in the middle of downtown, right under our noses, they probably didn't do it alone. Jake didn't answer. He just took a slow sip of his coffee and stared at the photo of the woman in the wheelchair. No ID, no traceable background, and no cooperation. Since being taken into custody, she'd gone silent. No calls, no visitors. Not even a lawyer. Maybe she doesn't need one, Jake said finally. Maybe she knows she won't be here long. That afternoon, Jake got a call from Lauren Kendricks, the investigative journalist he had spoken to the day before. I need to show you something, she said over the phone. It's about that device you found. I think I've seen it before. Jake met her at her office, a small space above a coffee shop that smelled like printer ink and old newspapers. She had cleared off her desk and laid out 3 photos side by side. Each showed a different person in a public space. One was sitting at a bus stop, another was walking a dog, the third was pushing a stroller. But what caught Jake's eye wasn't the people. It was the same bag, same shape, same stitching, same hidden pocket on the side. They've used this model of tote bag in multiple locations, Lauren said. I ran a visual pattern check through a few surveillance forms. It pops up at 6 different locations across state lines, all within the last 3 months. Jake picked up one of the photos. Different people, same bag, that's not coincidence. Exactly. I think the bags are preloaded with tech. Audio, maybe signal scramblers. Whatever they are, they're being distributed. My guess is someone's coordinating this operation like a playbook. Jake looked over at Arrow, who had followed him in and now sat by the window, ears perked. If we can find out where the bags are coming from, we might have a way to track their movements. Lauren hesitated. There's something else. Jake turned back. I got a message this morning, anonymous email. No sender, no reply address. It just said, "You're next. Back off." Jake's jaw tightened. You okay? I'm fine. Just shaken. But if they're watching me, it means I'm close to something they don't want me to find. Jake thought for a moment, then pulled out a small tracking device from his pocket. Wear this for the next few days, just in case. Lauren took it with a small nod. Thanks. Later that evening, back at the precinct, Jake reviewed the surveillance footage again. This time he focused on background reflections, windows, mirrors, anything that might reveal more than what was in frame. That was when he saw it. A reflection in a storefront window across from the Plaza. A man standing behind a pillar. Not doing anything, just watching. Jake zoomed in. The angle was bad, but he could make out a jacket logo, a small white eagle on a red circle. He ran the image through the database. It wasn't military. It wasn't local law enforcement, but it did match the emblem of a private security contractor based out of Chicago, one that had recently been under investigation for data leaks and black market surveillance sales. He printed the image and walked it straight to Harlan's desk. I think we've got our next lead, Jake said. By morning, they had tracked the security firm to a warehouse just outside city limits, abandoned on paper, but the utilities were still active: heat, power, internet. Jake geared up, this time with a small task force in tow. Arrow wore his tactical vest, his nose twitching even before they got out of the car. As they approached the building, Arrow stopped. He sniffed the air and gave one short bark. He's got something, Jake said, signaling the team to spread out. They breached the building quickly. Inside it was quiet. Too quiet. Rows of metal desks, blank monitors, empty racks where servers had clearly been removed. But one room stood out. Locked, reinforced. Jake forced the door open and stepped inside. On the wall was a large screen. It flickered on by itself. A live feed appeared. It was Lauren. She was sitting at her desk, unaware she was being watched. A small red light blinked from the corner of her bookshelf. They're watching her, Jake whispered. Then the screen cut to black. 3 words appeared. "Too late, officer." Jake froze. This wasn't about gathering intel anymore. This was personal, Arrow growled low behind him. Jake reached for his radio. "Unit 14. Send a unit to journalist Lauren Kendrick's office now. High alert. She's in danger." He ran from the room, adrenaline pounding in his ears. Whatever this network was, it had just drawn a line in the sand. And now Jake knew they weren't done. They were just getting started. Lauren Kendricks had just started writing when she noticed something strange. Her screen blinked. Only for a second. A faint red hue like a camera being activated. She paused, looked around, then reached over to unplug the Wi-Fi router. It was a habit she picked up after years of investigative journalism. When in doubt, disconnect everything. The room fell silent. She stood, grabbed her phone, and was about to call Jake when someone knocked on the door. 2 short taps, then 1 long, the exact knock Jake had told her to expect if something went wrong. She didn't hesitate. She moved to the back of the office, grabbed the emergency kit she kept behind her filing cabinet, and opened the side door that led into the alley. She didn't wait to see who it was. Lauren had been hunted before, but never like this. Jake's cruiser screeched to a stop in front of the coffee shop. The patrol unit had already arrived, but no one had eyes on Lauren. The front office was empty, but the door was wide open. Arrow jumped out of the car before Jake could fully open the door. "Track," Jake commanded. Arrow sniffed the ground near the entrance, circled once, then bolted toward the alley. Jake followed close behind. Trash bins, graffiti, back doors. Nothing unusual, until Arrow stopped. He let out a low bark, then nosed a broken phone on the ground. It was Lauren's. Jake picked it up, turned it over. The screen was cracked but still lit. Her last call had been dialing him. "Dispatch," Jake said into his radio. "We have signs of forced surveillance. Subject may have fled the scene on foot. Requesting perimeter check and any street cam footage near Jefferson and Pine." Arrow suddenly pulled left, down the alley toward a chain-link fence. There was a piece of scarf stuck at the top. She had gone over. Jake climbed quickly after him, landing hard on the other side. They were now behind an old auto repair shop, and Lauren was nowhere in sight. 15 minutes later, a call came through. A woman matching Lauren's description had been seen at a gas station 4 blocks away. She had borrowed a phone from a clerk, called someone, then left in a rideshare vehicle. Jake tracked the account. It had been paid in cash, no ID attached, but the driver's dash cam had picked up the route. They were headed toward the outskirts of town. Jake followed. So did Arrow. The car pulled up to an old farmhouse that had been converted into a retreat center years ago. Now it looked mostly abandoned, faded shutters, an empty swing, a barn out back with broken windows. Jake stepped out slowly, letting Arrow walk ahead. He knocked twice. No answer. "Arrow," he whispered. The dog sniffed along the doorframe, then pushed his weight against the wooden door. It creaked open. Inside, the air smelled of dust and something else. Burnt plastic. Jake stepped inside, hand on his sidearm, eyes scanning. There, in the corner, was Lauren. She was seated in a chair, holding a flashlight and pointing it at a series of open hard drives and notes. Jake exhaled. "You scared me half to death." "I had to run," she said. "There was someone inside the building. They had my schedule, my apartment code, everything." Jake stepped closer. "What are you doing out here?" I remembered this place. It used to be a retreat for journalists. I came here for a writing workshop once, years ago. Nobody uses it now. Figured it was off-grid enough to be safe. Jake looked over her makeshift workstation. "What's all this?" "I decrypted part of the drive we found," she said. "And I found something they didn't want us to see." She turned the screen toward him. It showed a map, pinpoints across the country. Over 100 red dots, each dot marked a location: schools, airports, hospitals, public buildings. Jake leaned in. "These aren't just random surveillance points." "No," she said. "They're signal nodes." "Nodes?" "Places where short-range signal disruptors have been deployed. These people aren't just watching, they're blocking. Jake tried to process it. They're cutting off communications in specific areas, but why? Lauren pointed to the screen again. In each of these spots, something happened. A robbery, a kidnapping, an unexplained disappearance. Most of them were chalked up to random crime. But I think the blockades were used to disable alarms, prevent emergency calls, erase camera feeds. Jake's heart dropped. And we've been blaming street crime this whole time. Lauren nodded. And they're expanding. Jake turned to Arrow, who had moved toward the door and was growling low. Someone's outside, Jake said. He looked through the side window. A black SUV was parked near the barn. No lights, no sound. But they were not alone. Jake guided Lauren to the back room, locking the door and handing her a small radio. If anything happens, get out through the cellar. Follow the creek until you hit the old trail road. Signal when it's clear. What about you? I'm not letting them get close. Jake returned to the front room, crouching low behind a table. Arrow was now fully alert, body low, muscles tight. Jake whispered, "Ready?" Arrow barked once. The first shadow moved past the front porch window. Jake stayed silent. Then came the sound of the front gate swinging open. Footsteps on gravel. 2, 3. Maybe more. Jake waited until the first figure stepped onto the porch before flipping the breaker switch. The house went dark. The man on the porch hesitated. Jake moved swiftly, stepping out and raising his badge and firearm. Police. Hands where I can see them. But the man ran. Another emerged from the barn side. Arrow chased immediately. Jake followed, ducking as a third figure appeared near the tree line. Gunfire erupted. Jake returned fire, calling into the radio for backup. In the distance, he heard Arrow bark sharply, then a yelp. He turned and sprinted toward the sound. There, near the edge of the barn, Arrow had tackled one of the intruders to the ground, but Jake's stomach turned when he saw blood on Arrow's left flank. He fired a warning shot, into the air. The remaining men fled into the woods. Jake dropped beside Arrow. "You're okay?" he whispered, checking the wound. It was shallow. A graze. Arrow licked his hand, still breathing heavy but alert. "You saved us again." Sirens wailed in the distance. The cavalry had arrived. Later that night, with Arrow patched up and resting, Jake sat beside Lauren on the farmhouse steps. "You said there were over 100 locations," he said quietly. "Yes. How many people know?" "Right now, just us. And maybe them." Jake looked out at the field. "So what do we do now?" Lauren thought for a moment. "Tell the truth, even if it scares people." Jake nodded. "Then let's make sure Arrow gets his credit. He didn't just stop a woman in the plaza," Lauren smiled. "He stopped a war before it started." The sun was rising over Lexington when Jake pulled into the station lot. It had been a long night at the farmhouse. Arrow was resting in the back seat, bandaged but alert. His eyes scanned the horizon like he was still on duty. The department was already buzzing. Word of the attempted ambush had spread quickly. Officers greeted Jake with quiet nods and concerned glances. Most of them knew bits and pieces, but only Jake and a few others knew how close they had come to missing everything. Jake opened the door for Arrow, who stepped down carefully, still favoring his left side. But there was no hesitation in his walk. He was still the same dog that had stopped a fake wheelchair, chased down intruders, and sniffed out the truth when no one else could see it. Inside the precinct, Lauren Kendricks was already there. She had spent most of the early morning hours uploading the data she had decrypted. With the help of a secure federal channel, she had sent copies to multiple agencies and non-profit watchdog groups. "Once it's out," she said to Jake, "they can't bury it." He nodded. "Good. Because if we let this slip back into the shadows, they'll only regroup." Lauren turned the monitor toward him. "Do you know what I found this morning?" Jake leaned closer. It was another map, this one smaller. Focused. A red dot blinked on their own city. "They already had Lexington marked," she said. "It was a test site. The plaza was just the beginning." Jake rubbed his forehead. "An arrow stopped it before it spread. She smiled softly. He did more than stop it. He exposed it. By afternoon, the FBI arrived. They took custody of the devices, the decrypted maps, and the surveillance records. Jake provided his full statement. So did Lauren. It wasn't long before they confirmed what the two already suspected. The network was international, privately funded, focused on disrupting digital infrastructure in high-density civilian zones. It was terrorism dressed as data collection. They had used people like the woman in the wheelchair to blend in. Fake disabilities, untraceable IDs, smiles that disarmed suspicion. But Aro hadn't been fooled. A week later, the plaza looked just like it had before. Kids splashed around the fountain. Musicians played under the oaks. Couples walked hand in hand past the coffee truck. Jake and Aro returned, not on duty this time, just walking. People recognized them. Some waved. A man bought Aro a bacon strip and thanked him for keeping his daughter safe. Jake smiled at each gesture but kept his focus on the bench, the same bench where it all began. He sat down slowly, watching the crowd. Aro laid at his feet, eyes still scanning, nose still twitching with every breeze. Jake looked down at him. I wonder how many times we've missed what you see. Aro didn't respond. He just stayed close, a silent reminder that not every threat is obvious and not every hero wears a badge. That evening, the city council held a public meeting. The mayor gave a speech. Reporters filled the front rows. At the end of it, Jake was called to the stage. Beside him stood Aro, tail wagging slow and steady. The mayor cleared his throat and said, "Some heroes speak with words, others with actions. But this one, this hero, spoke with a bark that changed everything." The crowd stood in applause as Aro received a service medal. It wasn't just for the plaza. It was for everything. For trusting his instincts. For saving lives. For seeing what others couldn't. Jake leaned down and whispered, "You deserve every bit of this." After the ceremony, Lauren caught up with Jake on the sidewalk outside. "I'm not writing the article," she said. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because I'm writing a book instead." She smiled. "One chapter will be called The Bark That Broke the Silence," Jake laughed. "You'll make him famous. He already is." She paused, looking out at the plaza bathed in soft light. "You know," she said, "we spend so much time looking for the big things, the loud ones, the obvious signs. But maybe the most dangerous threats are the ones sitting quietly beside us, waiting, watching, until someone brave enough decides to speak up." Jake nodded. "Or bark." They stood there a moment longer, neither saying much, just listening. To the wind, to the calm, to the sound of a city that had no idea how close it came to being something else. Later that night, Jake sat on his porch, watching Aro sleep at his feet. The sky above was clear. No sirens, no tension, just silence. He thought about everything that had happened. The woman who pretended, the van that watched, the farmhouse ambush, the list of names, the signals meant to erase their voices, and he thought about the people who had dismissed Aro's barking that first day, the ones who had scolded him for bothering a woman in a wheelchair. They had meant well, but they had been wrong, and Aro had been right. Jake looked out over the quiet neighborhood and asked himself the question that had been sitting in his chest for days. How many times have we silenced the truth just because it didn't look the way we expected? Dear viewer, before you go, what if the next warning didn't come from a whistleblower or an alarm, but from someone you least expect? Would you trust your instincts? Or would you stay silent and let it pass? Tell us in the comments, have you ever ignored a small sign, only to realize later it was something important? And remember, the smallest voice can sometimes be the loudest truth, especially when it barks.